the alley-oops at Kezar to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. Welcome to the show. I want to talk about the 49ers' biggest off-season priorities. They're going to have some. It's going to be some guys that they needed to go ahead and make sure that they take care of, that they pick up. And what's up, Caleb? How's it going, KNDR? Has actually made it on time. You're here. The 49ers have, a bunch of priorities they're going to have to take care of. 25 free agents. Who exactly are they going to be able to bring back? What players are they looking to upgrade from? It's one of the most interesting conversations. On the channel, of course, been going through different positions and talking about those free agents, but haven't discussed the priority that you have on each position group. So I want to get in here and do an action where, if you are in chat, you want to interact and let me know your thoughts on it as well as we go through these free agents and discuss exactly what the priority is for the San Francisco 49ers. And what's up, East Coast Red and Gold Podcast? How's it going? Welcome to chat. I think it's one of the most interesting things is how Kyle and John plan on handling it. Because when you go through the list of free agents, the names on names. And let's start with the defense with their free agents. Jimmy Ward, of course, the most high-profile defensive free agent the 49ers have. $9.5 million is what he made last year, and he's probably going to get something close to that on the open market if he plays safety. Of course, the 49ers did not play him at safety last year. They played him at nickel. He suffered the injury during training camp, and then Tishawn Gibson came in and played so well that Kyle Shanahan needed him to play the nickel, and that's what he did. What's up, Traffic? How's it going? And so Jimmy Ward's the most high profile. I think after that, then you go Samson Ebukam and Emmanuel Mosley. Both guys still young. Ebukam not even 28 years old yet. Mosley not even 27 years old yet. Still young guys on the defensive side of the ball. Azeez Al-Shaair, let's be honest, he's all but gone. Last year made close to $4 million. Probably going to end up with Houston Texans as their Mike linebacker. He'll be gone. Hassan Ridgeway along the defensive line. We talked about him in the defensive line video. Great, still under 30 years old. Kerry Hyder, been a low cost guy under Chris Kasarik for a while. Bo Hurst, a defensive tackle who the 49ers really haven't got any production. He's been on the team for 2 years, and they haven't got anything out of him yet. He's going to be somebody they could be interested in bringing back. Tishawn Gibson, came in. He's almost 33 years old, but he played for the league minimum last year, pondering retirement. So we'll see if he ends up coming back. Jordan Willis, he was playing on a $1.1 million contract. So, potential there. Jason Verrett probably going to retire. It's just unfortunate, but just too many injuries for Jason Verrett. He's probably going to be on his way out. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles is going to be a restricted free agent. So the 49ers have, can set some sort of designation on him. It will not be a first-round designation. A second-round designation would mean a team willing to sign him would have to give you a second-round pick plus pay him his contract. Look for the 49ers to go right of first refusal, which means a team could come in and sign Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. He's open to, go ahead and work with other teams and find a contract, negotiate contracts. And if he found one he liked, they could sign him. The Niners have the ability to go ahead and, match if they wanted to. Kevin Givens is not even 26. He's about to be 26 years old. He made under $1 million. He's a restricted free agent. Same thing, probably right of first refusal. Tarvarius Moore, he's probably, his last days have probably happened in San Francisco. He's been relegated more than anything to being a special teams player. So he's probably gone. Charles Omenihu is going to get a huge pay increase. He's not even 26 years old, and he only made $700,000 last year. The odds of him coming back on a similar low paying amount and not very good. So it looks like Charles Omenihu is probably going to get a really, really big contract. And that's the defensive players that are going to be free agents. On the offensive side of the ball, a tremendous amount. Of course, Jimmy Garoppolo, he's going to be gone. At least that's what we say, but we know what happened last year. But Kyle was pretty adamant that Jimmy Garoppolo, he didn't see them having a future here. And then the most high profile for players who could come back has to be Mike McGlinchey. McGlinchey is a guy that, I'm sure lots of fans have mixed feelings and mixed emotions about because of the position he played and overall what people believe is up with him as far as missed blocks. He's still not 30 years old. He made about $4.5 million last year. He's gonna be up there closer to 12 to 15 million in that range. If it gets as high as 15 million, I don't know if the 49ers can afford to bring him back. So I think that the 49ers are gonna have to make some decisions on McGlinchey. I think they'd like to get him back, but then you have Daniel Brunskill. Brunskill made $2.4 million last year. Probably will get a little bit of a pay increase, but he is coming close to 30 years old. So that might slow him down. Tyler Kroft, I mean, if he wants to come in for a cheap rate, I think they could bring him back. They're going to have some questions in that tight end room and whether they want to upgrade. We've been saying on this channel that we've been looking for them to upgrade tight end behind George Kittle for a long time, and maybe this is the time with also Ross Dwelley being a free agent. I don't expect them to bring Dwelley back. He spent most of the season, out and inactive. Jake Brendel, is over 30 years old. I think it's all going to come down to how close is Nick Zakelj, how close is Jason Poe to being able to take that position. Even mentioned a little bit about Colton McKivitz taking some center snaps. So Chris Forster has been pretty active about that. That's going to be a decision that has to be made. Colton McKivitz is a restricted free agent. The 49ers will definitely want to keep him. They have a lot of value on him. And then Jawan Jennings, he's exclusive rights free agent, so he's not going anywhere. He will be a part of the team this season. Traffic says we got to pick up the option for BA2, in my opinion, this offseason. That should be a big priority. Yeah, they're going to pick up the option for sure on Brandon Ayuk, and it'll make him the 28th highest paid wide receiver in the league. It's not crazy. So that'll happen. That they'll play through this year, and then they probably we'll talk contract negotiations with him next year, which will also, be coming into where you're starting to talk about Debo. Matthew said, any chance we restructure Trent and Eric? I think there are potential to go ahead and restructure some contracts. There are players that, you can work on and work off of that could, help get a lot of money and free up a lot of ability to sign or bring in either your own players or players that are going to be available on the open market. You could do Trent Williams. I think the only thing is with restructuring someone like Trent is he's kind of mulled over retirement. I know he didn't think about it long, but you don't want to keep pushing that money, down to these extra years. When you have these extra years that have dead money in them, and then he retires, you're still on the hook for those. The 49ers are still going to be paying for D Ford this year. There's still dead money that they're paying on other players. So they need to make sure they don't push some of those guys down the line. If you have a player that you're going to eventually extend, then that can help with the dead money, because you can kind of, when you sign him to an extension, you can put him in those void years, and then you don't lose as much money. So Armstead, I do believe, is a restructuring candidate. Fred Warner is a restructuring candidate. George Kittle, of course. And then also Christian McCaffrey. They can turn a lot of his $12 million salary into signing bonus. So I think they can free up close to $7 million with Christian McCaffrey. So McCaffrey, Kittle, Warner, Armstead, I think those are probably the most likely if they need to free up money for restructures, which they probably need to do to make sure they can bring their players back and then still be active on the market. Bring in who they want. But that's the thing. Who are they going to bring back? What do you guys think that's in chat? Who do you think what position is the highest priority for the 49ers? Where do they have holes? I think, you look at we'll just go over the defense real quick. The defensive line, you're missing at least one starter because Samson Ebukam is a free agent. Charles Omenihu, who would be the first guy in, he's a free agent. But then along the defensive line, opposite of Eric Armstead, you have right now, you have Javon Kinlaw. And, there's question marks about Kinlaw. He's been getting, not been able to stay healthy. So you might need to, get a defensive tackle that can play there. Could it be as simple as, we want Hassan Ridgeway to play that nose tackle position and sign him and bring him back, then go with a backup route that way. So I think you have two potential starters you need to find on your defensive line. Linebackers, you're looking for one, right? Azeez Al-Shire is going to go, but you may have already gotten the replacements last year. Oren Burks is going to be available to step in and play. You have Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles if you sign him as a restricted free agent. And then you have Marcelino McCurry-Ball, who we know they're happy with. They signed him to a new year, 1-year deal. So those kind of make sense. Linebackers, pretty solid. I think you could find, a guy in the draft, find a low bargain basement guy, because when it comes down to it at that linebacker position, they're only playing 15 to 20 snaps a game. And what's up, Matt? How's it going? It's not a lot. There's just not a lot of snaps that's going to be played there. Most are now nickel, with so many sub packages being played in the league. So linebackers pretty secure. When you go to cornerback, if you've been happy with Deommodore Lenoir, then you have two quality corners already, Lenoir and Charvarius Ward. It could be, if you believe they need to upgrade from Lenoir and move him into nickel, then that could be a priority for the 49ers in the offseason, just re-sign Emmanuel Mosley, or to find another corner to play opposite of Ward. If you believe Lenoir is good, then it may not be such a high priority. You still have Sam Womack, who you drafted last year. He could definitely play in the nickel or outside. So they've got some flexibility there. Now, is Womack ready to step in and start? Who knows? I didn't think Deommodore Lenoir was going to be a guy that was ready to step in and start, but he equated himself very good. He did a very good job once he stepped in and got significant snaps. So I think that is a guy that you could think about. The cornerback position is probably not that bad. Then safety, you are missing a starter. You have two starters and you're missing one. So you probably have to make that somewhat of a priority on defense. Matthew Rowley says, who was the linebacker we just signed? 1-year contract. Lots of excitement about him. I don't remember him. It's Marcelino McCurry-Ball. They signed him as an undrafted free agent. McCurry-Ball was a safety in college, but was adjusting to linebacker. He needed to put on some size. So last year, he was about 212 pounds. Of course, they probably want to get him closer to 230 to be the new style hybrid type linebacker that the 49ers have been using. And they are very high on him, but he was very raw. He was learning the position. But we've seen this transition from multiple 49ers linebackers, whether, that was Fred Warner or Azeez Al-Shire or Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles. These guys are switching positions and then developing. Marcel Harris, another one that they switched from safety to linebacker, and it ended up helping them in the long run. Matt Burgos says, biggest priority outside looking in, whoever is responsible for managing injuries. They got to go medical staff, strength, conditioning, etc. They already actually redid the entire injuries, the whole crew. They did the medical staff, the strength, the conditioning. They redid all that a couple years ago. Of course, COVID threw it off a little bit with the new rules and all that. But actually, the 49ers improved in the injury category as far as number of injuries this year above every other year that they had. I know it's been highlighted more so because of the quarterback position, but in the overall, the team was more healthy this year than it has been in the last several. So it's a trend in the right direction with some unforeseen and unlucky circumstances. So I think it's just one of those things where they are getting better. They're finding ways to manage. I think injuries are just going to be a part of the game, especially with the way the league is handling off-season workouts now. There's not a lot of contact. Training camps are shorter. OTAs are different. Mini camps are different. So there's just going to be more opportunity for players to get hurt. I think they are trending in the right direction, even though it doesn't look like it because we went through 4 quarterbacks. But I get what you're saying. Jimmo says all 3 of those cornerbacks have potential, especially Womack. Yeah, I like that. And KNDR says, do you think E-Man will be affordable since he is coming off an ACL? I think that when it comes down to E-Man, I do think he's going to be affordable coming off the ACL. He should be pretty close to being healthy when they get to training camp because it happens so early on in the season. So I'm optimistic there. I think if he would have played the whole season, he probably would have made anywhere from $7 to $9 million on the open market. E-Man, if he would played at the higher level that it was potential to be, he probably could have made double digits. But now it'll probably be cheaper. So probably a very similar contract to what he was playing before, which was around $6 to $6.5 million, where you could find E-Man. Jimmo, I agree with you. The 49ers have some good young cornerbacks. I think bringing Emmanuel Mosley back into the mix and then allowing Deommodore Lenoir and Sam Womack to battle for that nickel corner spot, then you have a guy that can step in right off the back, and I think it would be good. I think you'll be okay with that. So I mean, I'm okay with the cornerback room overall, but they need to go ahead and handle. Matt says trade all 4 quarterbacks for Rodgers. No way. All 4 quarterbacks are still cheaper than Aaron Rodgers. It's all about salary cap. No, the Aaron Rodgers said he's not coming to San Francisco, and we do not need Aaron Rodgers. We're okay with who we have right now. Travis says, speaking on the quarterback, who is your quarterback 1 going in next year? And should the Niners look to sign a veteran like a Matt Ryan or something for cheap? I think overall I'm looking forward to a quarterback competition between the 2 guys. I think, with Trey Lance, you see some spectacular plays. I mean, he's got the ability to make every throw, to, take off and run. There's some cool things dynamically there. I just think that the offense ran a lot smoother with Brock Purdy at the helm. I've definitely seen more from Brock Purdy, within this offense than I see from Trey. And I know it's not apples to apples because Trey Lance didn't have Christian McCaffrey. He only played in a monsoon in Chicago. But I've seen Brock Purdy operate this offense at a high level. So I think that a lot of it's going to come down to what happens on the 22nd when Brock Purdy has surgery. If Brock Purdy has surgery and they put in the UCL brace and it works out well and he's only out 3 months, and then he can start his throwing and building up his arm strength and be ready close to training camp, or at least into the first part of the preseason, I think you have to think Brock Purdy has a leg up, the way George Kittle and Nick Bosa said. I think that could be the case. But it's going to be nice for Trey for a second straight season to get a tremendous amount of the reps and snaps during OTAs, during the offseason, during the first part of training camp. And if he's able to do the things that he hasn't been able to do well right now, is throw on time, get the ball out, throw from the pocket. I mean, he makes some really good throws. It's the timing that's sometimes a little bit off. So I think that right now I put Brock Purdy slightly ahead of Trey Lance, but I think it's all going to have to be proven on the field. And I think Trey Lance is going to be given an opportunity to go in there and compete, and he's got to seize it. He's got a lot of talent and a lot of ability, but he's got to be able to consistently get it done. It's all about consistency. We've seen consistency from Brock. We haven't seen it from Trey. As far as physical gifts, Trey off the charts. It's ridiculous. But I would say Brock is in the lead right now. And then what's up, Paul? How's it going? Paul's in the house. Yeah, and that's what Paul's saying. Shanahan equals meritocracy. You're right. It is a meritocracy. So the best player is going to play no matter what position, no matter where you're drafted. And I think that is a good situation. And Jimbo says it right here. Both quarterbacks will push each other. So I think that's correct. Both quarterbacks are definitely going to push each other. Matthew says, anyone know why the 49ers never do cash over cap with dead years? Does York not have the money? They definitely have money. I think that they have worked the contracts. I know that John and Kyle said that anytime they go to Jed and they say, hey, this is what we want to do, he signs off for it. I think that they are trying to be somewhat fiscally responsible. They're trying to ensure that they don't have a financial, fall like some of the other teams have had in this league. But I think that there are times when I keep waiting for Jed York to just go to John and say, hey, let's go all in and let's get this done. I don't think they've done that yet. I think they've been close. By trading for Christian McCaffrey and giving up the amount of draft capital they did, I think that was one signal that, hey, we're going all in and we're trying to win. In the same category, though, just listen to the people talking about the draft, the procrastinate. When the way that they're talking about it, the insight guys, Mel Kiper, Todd McShay, and they're just saying straight up, this draft is not as deep and not as good, as the drafts that came before it. So maybe the 49ers were ahead of the game there. I knew they weren't giving up as much draft capital because of the value of those picks in this draft than others. So there's that. And Paul says there is dead years on some players' contracts. There's dead money on Eric Armstead, Trent Williams. They restructured. George Kittle restructured last year. There's dead money on his contract. So yeah, they've had dead money on contracts. Of course, they're going to be paying still, for D Ford. So yeah, they definitely have done restructures and had pushed some dead money. There was dead money on Jimmy Ward. They're still going to be paying some of Jimmy Ward's contract this upcoming year as well. What's up, Bomber T? How's it going? Uh, hope you are having a good one. So yeah, there's definitely money that the 49ers have put, dead money out there on some of these guys. And that's the thing is it's kind of like managing the dead money without, really let me get into the contracts real quick. I'll bring it. Dead cap. They still got D Ford. They're still paying Alex Mack. They'll have some contract on Alex Mack, Sermon, Castro Fields, Alubi, Gemmel. And then other than that, it's not really a lot. So there's not a lot of dead money there. It's mainly D Ford. D Ford is going to cost the 49ers about $8 million this year. Alex Mack, 1.2. So close to $10 million from those two. And then nearly 500,000 from Trey Sermon. Everybody else is pretty cheap. It's the normal practice squad and undrafted free agent guys, that you're going to have to pay with on that. So there's not a lot of money that's being spent in those contracts. They definitely have room. Of course, your top guys to restructure. Trey Williams, Eric Armstead, Fred Warner, and like we brought up, Christian McCaffrey. And then they also, when they extend Nick Bosa, it could lower the amount of money that he's going to be receiving this year. So those are all things to keep into account. Let's see. KDR says they all went into free agency in '94. That season went pretty well. Yeah, they did go and they went all in on that one, and it did work out. Jimmo says even without those picks, was one game away from the Super Bowl. Yeah, I'm okay with that. I was okay with the trade for sure. Bomber T says we should have been in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I mean you're an injury away, right? You can't lose your quarterback and expect to win against a good football team. It's just not going to happen. You can't go out there, with Josh Johnson, and then after that with no quarterback. You're just not. You can't win in the NFL without a quarterback. So I think that's something to remember. Is that always happens, and I think when we come down to it for priority wise, and I know we wanted to get into the priorities, what we think the number one priority is for the 49ers. I think that the number one priority is got to be offensive line. And here's why I say number one priority is offensive line. It's for the mere fact that Mike McGlinchey is got to be the most high profile free agent on the entire team, because around the league, there's just not very many guys that are at his level that are going to be available. And that's the thing. You either have to find someone that is equal or greater value than Mike McGlinchey. And what are the 49ers options? To go get, a McGarry, a cheaper option that's maybe not as good. I think that is something that you don't want to do. Is Colton McKivitz up to the level where he can step in for Mike McGlinchey or Spencer Burford? I think those are all question marks. And you have the same question marks with Jake Brendel. Even though Jake Brendel wasn't really what everyone got excited about as a starter, he did okay. He was able to handle himself pretty well, especially down the stretch. I thought he played better, but he is on the other side of 30. He's not getting any younger, so he's not exactly the long-term answer for the 49ers at center either. So they drafted guys, and this is what the 49ers do. They draft offensive tackles that they can move other places. They drafted Nick Zakelj. They have talked about him potentially being the long-term answer at center. They worked with Colton McKivitz a little bit at center. I know that's something that has been discussed, but I think McKivitz more in line to play right tackle. So tackle-wise, McKivitz, is a guy that you're really looking at. Jalen Moore, but I think there's just question marks on this team. Who are you going to bring back? And if they walk away from Mike McGlinchey and Jake Brendel, and who are the options that you're going to come up with? Because when you now are picking, I mean, I agree you trade for Christian McCaffrey, but now you're not drafting until, close to pick 100. Who are you going to get? Because I don't think Spencer Burford can be the every year, thing that happens where you get a guy in the fourth round that can start. So who is that guy that you can find in that part of the draft that can step in and start? And I've heard lots of people, they bring up centers all the time. Well, the 49ers can draft this center out of this college or this college. They don't draft centers. I mean, besides Aaron Banks, they've all been offensive tackles that they've drafted and then switch positions, because they're wanting that athleticism and that size. And in college, normally the best players, best athletes are playing offensive tackles. So I think that's why Kyle Shanahan normally goes that route. So who is going to take over for Mike McGlinchey? If it's Colton McKivitz, okay, you're saving money, but are you getting better? Are you staying close to the same? And if it's Nick Zakelj, we just don't know. We don't know anything about it. Chris Forrester, Kyle Shanahan may have a really good idea of Nick Zakelj's ability or Jason Poe's ability to play center. Nick Zakelj and Jason Poe definitely have the intelligence to do so. Two of the smartest players on the team. But I think there's just so many question marks involving the 49ers offensive line that I think it has to be the number one priority to be able to go ahead and take over and take that spot. So I think that's the number one. Jimbo says need more protection for 25-yard breaking route to develop. Yeah, the play overall was schemed right. I like that play call. I think that they were expecting Reddick to do one of two things: slow down a little bit for the play action and play his run responsibilities. And then number two, they brought Deebo Samuel out as well. But they also had tackle, then George Kittle, and then Tyler Kroft. So they widened him out really far. They thought it was going to be enough time, and it just came up, a half second too slow. So I think that remembering that is the key. It's just that it was a good design. The play was designed right. You just didn't get the timing correct, and it didn't work out. So it's good. And Bomber T says we need two good quarterbacks. They have two young guys that could be doing a very good job. So yeah, I'm okay with that. I think that remembering that is cool that we have those two guys and two guys that are on rookie schedules. Bomber T says Brock is going to heal up fine. I had the same injury in 2019 and my arm feels great now. Well, that's good. I think that is really good. And what's up, Philip? How's it going? He says Nick Zakelj was hired to be the center of the future. Time to start him. It could be. And if they drafted him and he developed last year and he's able to step in now and you can marry him to these young quarterbacks, center to quarterback, that would be fantastic. And that would also mean your young battery of players in the middle are very young. Aaron Banks, Nick Zakelj, and then, Spencer Burford. That'd be fantastic. And if it was that they believed that Colton McKivitz was the guy that could start at right tackle, I mean, you're talking about guys who were drafted in 3 consecutive drafts, basically making up your entire offensive line except for the great Trent Williams, who would be holding down the left side. That would be a fantastic draft and development from this 49ers group. And I think that's true. And Jimmo says, yep, O-line for me, should have reloaded at right tackle last draft. I think they probably are pretty high on Colton McKivitz. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe that's what's coming down to is they feel comfortable with him or they have another way. I just don't see the guys on the open market free agent wise. And so far, I've just started preliminary getting into the draft. I haven't seen anyone kind of in that 3rd to 7th round range right now that I'm looking and saying, you know what, that guy could start at right tackle. So that makes me a little nervous. All the while, I just don't know how much Mike McGlinchey is going to command on the open market. I know I started hearing people say the Chicago Bears with over $100 million in free agency are going to pay him $15 million a year. And I think in that case, it would be a lot like Laken Tomlinson. They'd have to let him go. So I think that's one of the things that's going to be interesting during the season to watch. And that's what Paul's saying right here. Will be interesting to see how the 49ers red shirts show up next year. Traffic says, are there any big free agents from other teams you got your eye on this offseason? I think there's some guys. I think there really are some guys, this year that are going to be pretty good. The question marks are going to be, how much are you going to pay these guys? How much money is going to be available? It's just going to be, one of those things that's tough is, how many guys, can we find that are going to be available that you like? I mean, I've heard the normal names, right? Deron Payne, I was trying to think of other. Oh, and then Hargraves from Philadelphia. Philadelphia has a crazy amount of free agents. I mean, so we can go down the list of guys, that are out there, that you're really interested in. I think Robert Quinn is somebody that I'm kind of keeping an eye on. I know he's older now at 33, but he's a couple years removed from having, double-digit sacks, and you need an edge presence opposite of Nick Bosa that can get after it. We mentioned Hargrave. He's a guy that I really like. Yannick Ngakoue is a young guy. How would he look, with Chris Kasarik? I think he's somebody that's interesting. Most of these names are going to be interior defensive line, like Dalvin Tomlinson. He's somebody that, could play in the interior. So I think that there are options. I think the free agent options for the 49ers are going to come down to mainly defensive linemen. I think the defensive linemen is where the 49ers are going to want to spend their money. I don't think they're really going to spend their money, in other areas. And I need to go through the list even more and find some of these bargain basement guys, that fit the 49er system that maybe they could get a lot out of. Because that's what they've done, right? Through the years, they went through and they found guys, like that they thought like Arden Key or trading for Charles Omenihu, guys who maybe weren't on people's radar, but they could end up coming in and helping your football team. So they're going to look for guys who are either at the end of their career and they want to come in and try to win a Super Bowl, or guys who are maybe have underperformed or haven't got the opportunity that they're looking for, and you can go ahead and grab those guys. So I mean, like, if for instance, for tackle, we talked about earlier, Caleb McGarry, maybe he would be somebody the 49ers would end up going with, if something happened and they lost Mike McGlinchey. But I mean, it could be as simple as just Colt McKivitz. It really could. So and that's right there. Jimmo says pain for me. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people want Daron Payne, but I don't know how much that's going to cost. So that's going to be a lot of money, and that's one of the things that makes me nervous is how much money are they going to have to spend. I think Bosa is going to free up a little bit of cap space with his extension. I'm sure this year they'll turn a lot of it into signing bonus. So Hugo says, "What's up, TCC? Besides getting Purdy and Trey 100% healthy, I would say O-line. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too." BV says, "Ant, doesn't the McGlinchey drama remind you of Harris Barton saga? Keep him, don't keep him, year in, year out." Yeah, it does. It really does. And I think this is one of those things you expect. The offensive linemen have so much focus because, every single time that they make a mistake, there's such a highlight on them to play well. And I think sometimes, you got to realize that these guys are going to get beat. Defensive linemen are really good in this league. So at times, you're just going to have guys that get beat. But what things do they do well? How do they fit your system? Because just because a guy is good out there doesn't mean they are a fit for what Kyle Shanahan wants to do. Colt McKivitz is, but I was going to say, Mike McGlinchey really is a fit for what Kyle wants to do. Do I think they wish he would have developed a little bit more as a pass blocker? Yeah, I'm sure they do. But they definitely know what they need to do. And Jimmo says he will be the top free agent right tackle. That's the problem. That's exactly the problem. Somebody's going to overpay for Mike McGlinchey. He's the number one tackle out there. So then what are your options? You can't pay, an Orlando Brown, for instance, to come in and play. You can't afford two left tackles on your team. You just can't. So I think that when it comes down to it, I think we're one of those things where we're always going to, as a fan base, probably undervalue Mike McGlinchey's ability. And we just got to hope that Chris Verster can do what he did with Tom Compton and developed, Colt McKivitz enough to McKivitz step into that role, or that they can push like a Spencer Burford or a Daniel Brunskill out there and they can be successful. But I do worry about Daniel Brunskill being able to anchor. And I think that if they thought Burford was going to be the long-term answer, they would have went with Brunskill at right guard, and they would have kept working at Burford at right tackle. So I don't know. Paul says history says free agency won't happen for us on the first day. It'll be the second wave. I think that's true. It was last year, Travis Ward. He was a big dog that went. That the 49ers were able to get him. But most of their moves that they made in the first 3 days were moves that kind of flew under the radar. Whether that was George Odom or Oren Burks or Ray McLeod, they were moves that you didn't really see as big moves. They ended up paying pivotal dividends for the 49ers. Burks is probably going to start at the Sam linebacker spot this year, and then help on special teams. And, Odom is going to be significant depth, and Ray McLeod, we already know what he is, but those didn't look like big moves, but those are the kind of the normal moves the 49ers make. David M says, I'm probably in the minority with the fan base. I have a feeling, but I love if they somehow could get out from under the Armstead contract, overpaid based on production, availability due to health. I think I've seen that a little bit. I've been seeing that a little bit from people talking about, the Eric Armstead contract. The problem is with Armstead is Armstead's contract is huge. And if you moved on from Eric Armstead, you're going to have $21 million in dead cap, almost $22 million. There's just no way to do that. The safest way would be to restructure his contract, to lower his number this year and kind of push it down the line a little bit. It's just, unfortunately, you're not getting out from under Armstead. Now, I will say this. I'm a huge Eric Armstead fan. I know he dealt with the foot and ankle injuries this year, but this dude is one of the best interior defensive linemen in the league. I really think that. I think if you're paying him what you're paying him as an edge rusher, I don't see the value there. I don't think he was athletic enough to play that opposite of Nick Bosa. But ever since they moved him in, I believe he's worth every penny that they pay him because the way he's able to stop the run and the way he's able to pass rush from the inside. There are lots of times he doesn't get home, but he affects the pass. He creates a turnover. I mean, it was Jimmy Ward's interception from Tua Tagovailoa was because Eric Armstead was in his face and he threw the ball. So I think he adds a tremendous amount of value, but you're just not going to move off from a player that's going to produce $21 million in dead cap. You just can't do it. So I understand where people are coming from. They want the big cap numbers down, but I don't think it's going to happen. BB says, "What do you think of Jerome Payne?" Jerome Payne would be fantastic. He would be really fantastic. You could throw him in there, and he would be an absolute wrecker. Him and Armstead and Bosa together, it would be dynamic. He's a young player. He's still got a lot of career ahead of him. The problem is how much you're gonna have to pay him. Upwards of 15 to $20 million. I just don't think you can pay that. I think the 49ers would rather have a more rotational defensive interior line, and pay someone on the outside. You need an outside edge help for Bosa. And so I think defensive line is actually the second priority for the 49ers because they have so many free agents. Ebucom, Aminahue, it's just Jordan Willis, Kerry Hyder, even Kevin Givens is a restricted free agent. There's just so many players that they're going to have to, make up for, whether that's the normal bargain basement. Maybe they bring back a Maurice Hurst, maybe they bring back a couple of these guys, but they need to figure out what they're going to do opposite of Bosa. I like Ebucom, but production for 5 sacks is not enough opposite of Nick Bosa. We need someone that's going to get some attention on the other side. So I think that's part of it as well. Jimmo says his age makes me lean toward giving him a bag. You could. You really could. And BB said, ask about Ndamukong Suh. I think Sue has fallen off. I really do. Watching him, at the end of his season, I felt like, he definitely was at the end of their rotation. I don't think he can start in this league anymore. I think he's a more rotational piece. I think he's trying to win, a Super Bowl. I think he really does want to win a Super Bowl. But I don't think he's in the cards anymore. I don't think as many teams are going to be interested in him. I wouldn't be surprised if he retires. I liked him, in the middle of the season. I was like, man, that would be a nice upgrade, especially when we lost Ridgeway. I think Ndamukong Suh really could help the 49ers rotation, but I think that's what he is now. He's more of a rotation piece, and I don't know if he's going to want to do that. So we'll see. And Paul says he thinks that, that Armstead's going to be restructured. And Jimmo says risky and true outside would help Bosa out. Numbers outside Bosa isn't it. It's really not. Charles Omeni, who had 5 sacks from playing inside and outside, and then you had Samson Ebicom with 5 sacks. Jordan Willis had 2, so not a lot of sack numbers, but what is available, out there on the edge, that the 49ers can get. I think that's, if you're looking for, a free agent, there's some guys in the draft. I'm sure we'll be getting into those. But Robert Quinn, who I brought up earlier, he played for Philly. He's almost 33 years old. Him and Brandon Graham, both guys can still do it at a high level. But both guys are used to making, $13 to $15 million. Robert Quinn made $14 million to be a backup defensive end, for Philadelphia this year. Yannick Ngakoue, he got traded to Indy before the season started. He was another guy in that area. I'm not really a huge fan of Jadeveon Clowney, so I'm not going down that road. Matt, Leonidas makes sense because he was with Carolina, so potentially he's on the other side. I think when I'm looking for somebody to play opposite of Nick Bosa, because I've seen D Ford, that speed rush ability, that's what I'm looking for. Someone that's going to help collapse the pocket, push someone the other way. And there's not very many guys that are available, that can do that from the outside. Because even some of the names that used to do it, they're not as athletic as they used to be. Guys like Melvin Gordon, a guy like Justin Houston, I saw him mentioned the other day. To me, those guys don't have that athletic ability. Dante Fowler, it's not in the cards. So finding somebody that can do it, with speed on the edge, I think is very important for the 49ers. Because, there are guys, they could go ahead and bring back Arden Key, right? They could bring back Samson Ebukam. Shaq Lawson, guys like that. But are these guys going to be athletic enough off the edge? I think that's one thing I'm seeing is there's not a lot of guys that are going to be available on the open market that are going to do it with speed. And I think that's really what the 49ers, need opposite of Nick Bosa is that guy that can do it in the outside with speed. I think Robert Quinn's probably the closest guy I would say to that. But how much are you gonna have to pay him? I mean, last year, Chandler Jones got, I think, of 17 million, and he said it came down to the Raiders and the 49ers. The 49ers, how far did they go? Did they get close to that 14 million? Would they be willing to pay Robert Quinn 14 million? Not sure. But I think those are things that we got to take into account when we're thinking about our edge. Uh, Paul says, I think Drake Jackson improvement is our best. Hope for a good outside. Drake Jackson, I like Drake Jackson. Here's the thing, and I think he's going to get better on early rundowns, but right now he's not a 3-down edge rusher in this league or edge player. I think as a rushing the passer, he does pretty good. Kyle Shanahan's concerns about him as far as his weight, his strength, those kinds of things, I think are still things he needs to learn. I think you can't count on him to start opposite of Nick Bosa this year and put up significant numbers. I don't really like Samson Ebukам's numbers at 5 sacks. I'd rather that be a rotational piece. So I don't know if Drake Jackson is going to be ready to start opposite of Bosa and produce at that level. I think we might be a year ahead of that. So I think that they do need Drake Jackson, but they need a every down guy that can do it. I don't think that. I know Jimmo saying Drake Jackson needs to be an every down guy. I don't see it yet, and I think him being inactive, signals that Jordan Willis was out playing him, and not just as a defensive lineman, but also on special teams as well. I think it'll happen. I just think that, he needs to get better. And I think the offseason is going to show us a lot. You can definitely change in one offseason, but I don't think they can bet on that. David H says, thoughts on Kinlaw? I'm ready to move on from him. Just not working out, in my opinion. I think it's going to work itself out naturally. So I don't think the 49ers are going to exercise a 5th-year option, on Javon Kinlaw. I think it's just too much risk there, to give him a pay raise for his 5th year. Of course, his wouldn't be very much because he doesn't play very often. So his 5th-year option is definitely a lot less than a lot of players would be. But I think there are some real questions about the injury. We haven't seen him be able to hold up, and it affects his play. The longer he goes into the season, it feels like he just slowly falls off. And I think it's one of those things that I'm sure it's disheartening for him because he's dealing with this injury, not able to play up to the level that he knows he's capable of playing. But in the same regard, the 49ers have to look out after themselves, and they're going to need that money, not next year, but the year after, especially. Nothing's going to happen, with Javon Kinlaw. He's going to make $4.9 million next year. They're not going to cut him. They're not going to trade him. Number one, who would trade for him? I don't think there's value out there because of the injuries. Number two, you're not going to cut him because then you're just having 4.9 in dead money. And the 49ers don't want that. So I think Javon Kinlaw is going to be a part of the team. I think the bigger question will be, is he going to be still considered that starting guy opposite of Eric Armstead, or is he now going to become a rotational piece? If he becomes a rotational piece that can help you on your Bravo group stopping the run, I think that's where you kind of like what he could provide you next year. But, does that mean Hassan Ridgeway is a starter? If you believe Hassan Ridgeway can play that level, or you believe Kalia Davis can play at that level, or, if you do go pay big like Daron Payne, then yeah, I mean, you could potentially have a very solid run stopper with your second unit in Javon Kinlaw. But we'll see. I mean, maybe his knee will make a miraculous recovery. I don't think it's going to, unfortunately. I think it's just been too many injuries, that have kind of built up since he got hurt against Dallas in 2020. Because honestly, I think people fall in love with sack numbers. Ain't Bosa have 1 sack last 5 games or something like that. Drake Jackson is the answer as far as edge. You know what? I like Drake Jackson, but I can't watch his film and tell you he's the answer at edge. And I want someone to show me the film, from this year that shows that Drake Jackson has proven that he's the answer at edge. And when you look at Charles Omenihu, you look at Samson Ebukam, Jordan Willis, Harry Hyder, every single one of those guys have better technique. Every single one of those guys play the run better. Every single one of those guys got more hurries. The one thing that Drake Jackson did better than all of them was get his hands up and bat down the ball, which I love. That's great awareness. But I just think he's definitely a raw talent. I think USC hurt him a little bit, playing him off ball, not allowing him to continue to rush the passer. But to me, I don't think that you can say right now Drake Jackson's ready to go opposite of Nick Bosa. And the way he gets bodied up sometimes, I think that the 49ers, there's no way they can rest on the fact Drake Jackson's ready to go. This isn't a guy that you can just step in next to Bosa and be like, oh yeah, he's gonna have the same production as Samson Ebukam. I don't see it. I like him, don't get me wrong, but I think there's a year left, of development. Hugo says, how many picks 49ers got this upcoming draft? It's either 11 or 13. They haven't officially released all the numbers yet. Some of the new compensatory picks, with D'Amico Ryan's going and all of that. So it's going to be somewhere between 11 and 13, between pick 99, and 262 or whatever it will end up being after all the compensatory picks are given out to each of these football teams. So the 49ers are definitely going to have some picks. They're going to have some picks that they can use, and they've had a lot of success in the later rounds. I mean, we don't know what's going to happen with guys like Kalia Davis, who they got in the 6th round, but Brock Purdy was a 7th round pick. Nick Zakelj potentially could be a starter. They got him in the 6th round. Burford, a starter in the 4th round. And then we've just seen Elijah Mitchell. So there's a lot of value in those areas. I do think that those drafts were a lot deeper than this one. But I have found some players, and I've just started watching it. I have found some players that are in this draft that I really like. I found a nice safety player that I really like. I think the 49ers could draft a safety in this one. So I'm gonna start putting those things out here in the little distant future. I'll start putting out videos about draft picks and stuff like that. I've been focusing a lot on who the 49ers are going to bring back, and then I'm going to kind of turn the conversation to some of the guys they could sign, that are available in free agency around the league. Kind of trying to take it step by step, evaluate your team, evaluate your needs. That's what we're doing here. What are the most valuable needs, and then addressing those needs through free agency if you can, and if you can't, through the draft. I think the draft is a little more of a crapshoot than free agency, where you get proven commodities. So I think that's kind of how I'm going through it all. Jimmo says, why Abe Lucas was my number 1 pick last year. Abe Lucas, solid offensive tackle. For sure. I mean, if the 49ers would have drafted him, he would have been the answer at right tackle for sure. So yeah, I mean, he was a solid player, and maybe they'll be one of those guys. I mean, last year, the 49ers drafted guys that were on our top 49 board, including Danny Gray and Spencer Burford. So I think that there's also players that, I mean, I had never heard of Nick Zakelj. I hadn't watched him at all. I hadn't watched Sam Womack. So guys do come out of the woodwork when it comes to the 49ers, and maybe they have somebody already that they like. Oh, I think that's going to be fun. It's going to be funny. Jimmo says, stop doing backflips. You're 250. Tremendous athlete, right? I mean, the fact that he can even do that is crazy. Dave says, there a path for them to somehow trade up into round 2? Maybe. Of course. I mean, with them having 3 comp picks, they have the firepower. They also have picks in 2024. They have players that they can move on from if they like. So yeah, they could get into the 2nd round. I think that's possible. I think locating the player that they want to target in that 2nd round, that has a tremendous more value, than someone you could get at the end of the 3rd round. I think is the question. How much of a difference is it going to be value-wise from those guys? Listening to most of the draft experts talk about the 1st round, there's like 14 to 15 players that have 1st round grades. So what is that what's that difference once you get to the 2nd and 3rd round, and so on? So yeah, but I do think they could get there for sure. I think that there'll be a lot of teams that are going to be looking to trade out, maybe potentially get picks next year, and maybe that's what the 49ers are going to try to do. But I do think they have some holes that they're going to fill. We'll see how many they take up, in free agency, how many holes they fill. BV says, is this a big if? But if 49ers trade Trey, would Matt Ryan make a good backup quarterback? The Shanahan connection. I mean, I do think a veteran quarterback would make sense in that sort of situation. Somebody that could be in the room with Brock Purdy and go over things. I don't think it's as important. I've seen some people say they wouldn't draft a rookie quarterback because you need a veteran presence in the room. I don't think that's the case because of who our quarterback coach is. The fact that we have Brian Griese, I mean, this is a guy who played quarterback in the league, understands the ins and outs of the offense and what these guys are going through. They can do everything they need to do in the film room, going through the plays. So I don't think they need a veteran for that reason. I think if more so would be if Kyle felt more comfortable having a veteran, potentially if something happened, because you have such a veteran team that can win a Super Bowl or has that capabilities, that you wouldn't want to put more focus on that. So I think that's what it comes down to more than making sure that you have someone in the room for the young quarterbacks. I think Trey Lance has been in the league for 2 years now. Brock Purdy equated himself very well as a young rookie quarterback. So to me, you don't need a veteran for that reason. But if you could find a veteran quarterback that could handle something, if all hell broke loose, then yeah. And of course, if Trey goes, I think then that would make a lot of sense to get a veteran quarterback to be behind Brock Purdy and then also draft a young player. 49ers need to have 4 quarterbacks at least going into training camp. And with Brock Purdy potentially being on the shelf early on, then you're looking at them probably going with, somebody else even. You might even have 5 quarterbacks. We'll see how they do it. 3 will probably be enough. But we'll see. Jimmo says, we didn't know if Mike was going to be 100%. Abe was perfect. Yeah, we didn't. We did not know if Mike McGlinchey was going to be 100%. The fact he got over that injury is very impressive. It really is. I mean, he's done a good job of getting back and getting healthy. So yeah, I think that they could have went that way. They didn't. I think they've had a lot of scenarios where they went that way, and we'll see what pays dividends for the 49ers. Drake Jackson. We'll see how he helps the team. Danny Gray and then TDP. Debo Samuel singing high praise for DDP, and I thought overall that Drake Jackson just he's somebody that's going to eventually be a big time player, but it's going to take some time for him to develop. And then they got some good picks. And Spencer Burford's one of the best ones. As far as positional wise, we know that offensive line was 1, a defensive line was 2, and then after that, third one, I think it has to be the safety position. I know a lot of people have been lumping secondary, but I'm going to separate it and say safety because it's as simple as this. If you value Tashawn Gibson and you bring him back, your safety room is good. I know they're going to lose Jimmy Ward. That's not good. It sucks because he's a guy that I really like, but you can't pay him $10 million to play nickel. So you have to go ahead and move on from him. Gibson's a cheaper option. As long as he doesn't retire, you bring him back. Him and Hufanga had a natural chemistry together. And then you have George Odom. And then what else do you have at safety because you're losing Tarvarius Moore? I think you have Taylor Hawkins for sure. Hawkins was an undrafted free agent last year at San Diego State. Really like him a lot. So potentially he could slide in to the roster, or you could go another route and draft somebody. I think there's going to be guys available that you can draft. I mean, it's not a huge market for safeties. I mean, I guess there's a lot of guys that are available, but how much do you really want to pay a safety in this league? I think when you're getting a free agent, do you want to upgrade? I think the 49ers think they have their number 1 guy with Talanoa Hufanga. And then they're going to want to, if they're adding someone, it's going to be someone cheaper, along the way. So I think that the 49ers would be very happy going with Gibson and then drafting a player to come in and battle with Odom and Taylor Hawkins. And Odom's ability has been really nice. His ability, especially to help on special teams. Davis says, I see nothing wrong if Shanahan says quarterback is open competition in a camp between Purdy and Lance once both are healthy. Yeah, I don't see a problem with it either. And I think early on, because you're going to get so much from Trey during OTAs, during mini camps, during the first part of training camp, that I think Kyle's going to have a really good idea, of how Trey is looking. And then when Brock gets there, I think they'll flip it to give Brock more reps early on. And if Brock, is back to the same Brock that you saw, I think, Kyle will have a really good idea who's winning that competition. So because of a timetable, it might be easier for him to figure out. He'll have a really good idea of how Lance is looking early. And then once Purdy gets there, you flip the reps to him and see how he looks. And as long as, he's looking good, then I think, Kyle will know exactly which way he wants to go. Jimmo says, I hope Mike comes back. He played great this year. I'm with you. And he put, Gibson is in need, especially if Jimmy goes. Yeah, he is, and that's the thing. I think once he was hurt and they had a guy they brought off the bench, or brought off the street like Tashawn Gibson, and he played so well, I think they got set in their mind like, oh, we don't have to pay, a safety high top dollar money until Hufanga becomes a free agent. So I think they know they bought him a couple of years, where they could, or actually another year before they have to renegotiate a contract with Hufanga, so they could save some money there. It's unfortunate that it comes from Jimmy Ward, because I think everyone really likes Jimmy. But it is, it's just one of those things that happens. And then after that, so we talked about that. I think secondary, as far as safety, is that next priority. I don't think running back's a priority this year. I don't think wide receivers are a priority. This is one of those times where you don't need to sign anyone as a free agent. You don't need to really draft anyone unless you want to. You find somebody that does something different. I found a couple receivers I like in the draft. Of course, there's always running backs, and sure they'll end up bringing someone in at some point, especially if they keep a lot of those picks late in the draft. So I don't think you have to worry about that. So then, I mean, it comes down to cornerback, which I mean, it could be a priority depending on what you think of De'Amar Lenore and Samuel Womack, and tight end. And I think it is time for tight end to be that next priority behind George Kittle. 49ers like to run two tight ends, and they went with Tyler Kroft. He was the second guy in this year. Then they had Charlie Warner. Ross Joel is a free agent. He's probably going to be gone. So I think the 49ers are going to be looking to, go a different route at tight end. More than likely, it's going to be a tight end that that they draft, because they're going to want to have a cheap option, or they're going to want to have somebody that they can play, behind George Kittle, that can come in and do something in the passing game. The way that Brock Purdy, and I think Trey Lance will do the same thing, relies on these guys, I think is important. So, who is going to be the guy that they go for? I think that's going to be a really big question. It all depends on what you think you need. I mean, could you get a Robert Tonyan? Could you bring Tonyan in? I mean, right now, Spotrac says he's going to be about a $5 million contract. We know he's good friends, with George Kittle. He played tight end in a similar system in Green Bay, so he's going to understand it. To me, that would be an option. I mean, you'd have to pay a little bit more money than probably you want to, but to me, that's somebody that makes sense. A guy like Hayden Hurst. There are definitely tight ends that are available that you can address, and we know that Kyle Shanahan was in on a few guys last year, so I think the 49ers could look to upgrade the backup tight end job, and somebody like Robert Tonyan could be huge for the 49ers. So, but when you have a guy like Evan Ingram out there, Kyle Shanahan's always had a kind of a love for him as well. So I like that a lot. What's up, Donald? How's it going? Donald's in the house. And BV says strengthen the trenches. Yeah, I'm with you. So I that's why I had offensive line first, defensive line second. I had safeties third. And now I'm gonna put tight ends at 4. Then I think I would go corner at 5, and then after that, quarterback potentially. I think that's kind of the way the priorities work. I would like to see them upgrade for tight end. I mean, we've been saying on the channel for a few years now that they need to upgrade the tight end behind George Kittle, and I think now it's finally come to the time, that they could do that. So I think that potentially, this is kind of one of those times, that you potentially go ahead and start to do it. So I think that he could make a lot of sense for the 49ers, as far as Robert Tonyan and upgrading that tight end spot, if the money is what Spotrac says. I mean, if it is what he says, then yeah, then I think that potentially he would make a good move for the 49ers. So maybe that would be somebody that you could add, a guy that would make a lot of sense is Robert Tonyan. So I mean, that's my priorities. What do you guys think about it? Do you guys think that those priorities are pretty much right? Or would you go a different way? Would you go with a different guy, or a different order? Would you go offensive line, defensive line? Would you do those types of things? I'm very curious what everyone has to say about the order at which it went. Hugo G. Oh, this is a good one. Nobody talking about kicker, but Gold is going to walk also. Any free agent or draft kickers out there? You know what? Let's go ahead and look. I haven't checked the draft, to be honest. I'm going to keep it honest. I haven't looked at any kickers in the draft. I've started looking at players, and I've been trying to look at players in that range where the 49ers are going to have their first few picks. So let's see. Here are the kickers that are free agents. Of course, Robbie Gould. Mason Crosby from the Green Bay Packers. He was the highest paid at $4.3 million. So he made close to $500,000 over Robbie Gould. Matt Prater, he's available. He was $3.2 million. Of course, he's 39 years old. Greg Zuerlein, $2.7 million. Matt Gay, 2.5. Greg Joseph, 2.4. Brett Maher from Dallas, if he wants some missed extra points, he's available for under $1 million. Chase McLaughlin strong leg. The Niners had him in a couple years ago for a little bit, just under $1 million. Eddie Pinheiro, $895,000. So those are kind of the guys that are available. I don't know if any of those guys really trip anyone's trigger. I think Mason Crosby's a great kicker. I just don't see the 49ers putting that much money into him. Percentage wise, Robbie Gould had, one of the kind of like middle of the road as far as percentage of field goals made. Matt Gay had the best at 93%, followed by Maher at 90%. Oh, I'm sorry, Eddie Pinheiro actually had the best at 94%. So Pinheiro was the number one, and then Matt Gay. So you were looking for an upgrade, potentially those guys had really good seasons. Maybe those guys could be guys. So and then Matthew Rowley says draft Moody. Okay, well maybe they go with that route. Jimmo wants to just pay Robbie Gould, and I think that's what I feel most comfortable with as well is paying Robbie Gould. Jimmo says just have to have him kicking over other teams pregame. I know I love when he does that. Beavis says Gold is gold. Keep him in Scarlet and Gold. I like that. That's a lot of golds. Travis says a kicker out of Michigan. And yeah, Moody, thank you. So the kicker out of Michigan seems to be somebody that a lot of people are very interested in bringing in. So yeah, I mean, kicker, like Hugo said, has to be something they took care of Mitch Wisnowski. We'll see what Robbie Gould does. Potentially, I mean, that's a good move. They could go with a guy like Gold for a couple more years, depending on what money he wants. I don't know if he wants another big contract or if he's just looking for a Super Bowl. Maybe there was a couple years there where I know there's a lot of talk of him going back to Chicago, but I think now he would rather stay with the 49ers. So I think maybe they could get him for cheap, and that could be a possibility. But guys, I've been on for an hour. Thanks everyone for joining me. I really enjoyed it. First live back. I'm gonna do some more live, so pay attention. I'll make sure to put it out there in the schedules and everything like that. But thank you guys all so much for coming through. I had a great time talking with you. Very educated 49er fans, and I love it. But until next time, stay safe and remember the right way is always the 49ers.